Okay, half the day. Welcome back to the Guam Guy Show. Still here with Chris Rosario for, I guess, a two-part episode, or we'll just call it two episodes. The first time we tried to kind of split it between little fire ants, bees, hornets, and wasps, but little fire ants had just so much to it, it just turned into its own episode by itself. And so I've been very patiently, or he's been very patiently waiting to talk about bees. So let's just jump right into it. I think that was kind of our first interaction, Chris, was. I think we'd met at a charter day at University of Guam one time for something or another. And then I started making videos on social media, on my Instagram. And then one day I was just driving around and I'm all like, I want to do a video on bees.
That's right.
And so I think I don't know if I found your number or messaged you or whatever. I just called you up. I'm like, hey, can I do a video on bees? And you're like, sure.
Yep.
And I'm all like, hey, yeah. So like, I think my idea was like, we could go to a beehive, but I think it would be cool, like, if someone had like some bees on their property or whatever by accident and they didn't want them, like, and if you were gonna, if there was an opportunity for you to visit them and take the bees and the honeycombs and whatever else you call it off their property, and you're like, yeah, we actually have that happening tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was cool, and it just happened all perfect timing.
Mm-hmm.
I get these calls every week, sometimes just every month, but when you called, he asked for bees, and then I
The
get
bees
this
were
thing
there.
scheduled. Yeah, the bees were there, and it's just like it just all fell in place very, very much well for you. So yeah,
it worked out
Yeah,
perfectly
it
for
did.
me, no doubt about it. I'm gonna go ahead and play the video that was produced from that interaction, from that random chance phone call, perfect timing, like
Yeah.
stars aligned phone call, and turned into us going to, was it St. John's School?
St. John's.
It was
Yeah,
St.
yeah.
John's School up in I guess Upper Tumon.
Upper Tumon, yeah.
They had a bunch of bees, and it looked like a storage area for like ceramic clay.
ceramics, yeah,
And
yeah, that's what it was.
I've got some video of that right here. I should not be allowed to do this. I don't know how I got here.
I'm at St. John's School, and we're gonna get us some honeybees.
We carefully remove the individual honeycombs one at a time to be placed into trays for transportation off-site. And it's exactly as weird as it looks to hold a honeycomb in your hands. We got our proper beekeeping safety gear, slips, and then my Zoris. When the last honeycomb is removed and all are packed away, you can either vacuum all the bees into the box or let them come in overnight as they find their way back to their bee. I can feel the wind off of their wings.
Yes.
Oh, that's so trippy. This is the queen, and this is the little box that she goes in.
I got a handful of bees. This is the man Chris Rosario from Guam Beekeepers Association. If you have some bees at your house, what do you want them to do?
Call the pest hotline 475 PEST, Department of Agriculture, or any other beekeeper.
Yeah, so that was a really cool day in my life. Every once in a while, I'm doing a thing or I'm in a place and I'm like, I don't know how I'm allowed to be here or to do this. And that was one of those times. So that was really like, no hesitation. You got me a beekeeping suit to use for the day. And that's still a cherished memory for me. Like, I never imagined I could feel the wind off of the wings of bees, and when there's enough of them, it's just kind of like a cooling in your face. You could probably do something like that when the power is out.
Yeah, right.
And the aircon's not
Get a box
working
of
and the
bees
fans
and put
put
it
up
near
on a
you.
box next to your face. So why, like, so I know bees is a deep passion of yours just from our interaction
Yeah.
before, and I gotta ask, how did you get started with bees?
Well, again, it started based on the research at the University of Guam. Dr. Ross Miller, the research entomologist, got a grant to do a nationwide survey. Although the survey started in 2009, and then Guam got into the survey about 4 years later, and then we had he got the grants. He gave me a call and said, "Hey, how do you feel about doing work on honeybees?" And at the time, I didn't know even honeybees existed on Guam. Although I did know we had honeybees, but I didn't know like anything else about bees. And I said, you know what? Let me just give it a shot. And so quickly work turned into, there was a lot of work involving trying to get a hold of beekeepers on Guam. I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure since we're doing the survey, we must have several beekeepers on Guam. And quite frankly, we only found a handful of beekeepers. Only 5, not even 5 beekeepers.
Okay.
I only knew of 3.
Oh.
And so the National Honeybee Survey called to do 24 different apiaries, which means 24 different beekeepers.
What's an apiary?
So an apiary is a group of bee colonies in one location.
Okay.
So you can imagine, like in a farm, there'd be about 5 or 6 colonies just in that one particular location. That would be considered an apiary.
Okay.
Or like 2 or 3 colonies in someone's backyard, that would be an apiary. But when we talk about large scale, beekeeping, you're talking about like 20 to 40 colonies, even up to 100 colonies in one single location. But of course, that never really existed on Guam because we could never really get to large scale agriculture at all in general. And so doing the survey back in 2013 was very difficult because we didn't have that many beekeepers on island. So, but now we have about over 100 beekeepers.
What?
Yeah.
Over 100 beekeepers on Guam?
Beekeepers now. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's due to
you.
Well, I can't take all the credit.
I'm
though.
sure you're responsible for some of it. Yeah, I know there was a guy, Rod was there that day at St. John's, so that was really cool.
Rod Greeno from Half-Day Signs. We got Paul Packbeer from PCR, PCR Environmental. We got Dennis Larson. The list goes on and on and on.
My friend Timmy Toy.
That's right, Timmy Toy.
I think you might have worked with another friend of mine recently.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're the second friend and you two met up. Never mind.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of people just quickly got into it. And it's very interesting because in 2013, right, I was, again, didn't know much about bees. I wasn't a beekeeper. I was just after...
it was a job.
It was a job for me to go out and survey honeybees in the environment. Or in someone's in someone's apiary. So when we had once we got the grant money, I quickly went out and said, all right, let's look for some beehives. But it's not like you just kind of go out in the forest and then just search for bees. We basically had to get help from the PDN, so Guam PDN, Guam Daily Post, and then of course University of Guam PR, the public relations. We reached out to those people and say, hey, can you send out a message to the community that the University of Guam is conducting a study on the health of honeybees on Guam. And so quickly I did that. We did the whole. There was a whole article in the newspaper. I can send you the first article. It's really, really cool because like looking back at the time, I was like, wow, what was I thinking? Like, getting into like the bees and everything.
So now you're a full-on entomologist. It's your full-time job, and it's also your passion. Yeah. You raise bees and you help others with your bees, and so now you have all this kind of stuff going on. And before that, there was no insects on your radar.
There was no insects on my radar.
There's nothing happening.
Yeah.
So this is a really cool story. This is the kind of story you want to hear, the kind of story you want to think like, okay, I'm going to go to school. I don't know what I want to do yet, but maybe I'll find out, while I'm in school or working with the university, whichever the case it is. So, and I got to say, as of this recording, there's a UOG celebrating its 70th anniversary, and they have the temporary exhibit at the Guam Museum. So it's going to be in there for, I guess, 3 months. It's August still right now, so the next few months. And there's a picture of you in there. I don't know if you've seen it yet. I don't remember where it was.
That's pretty cool.
But
Nice.
it's there's a picture of me too. But it's my back, so you can't even see my face. but you know it's me because I think I'm the only shirtless person in the exhibit.
That's pretty funny.
And so you can see a little bit about this guy. So that's a really cool thing where like education leads to employment, and it's actually something where you discovered a passion, you found a passion, and then you get to keep it going.
Yeah, well, when this kind of all started, I wanted to be a vet. I wanted to be a veterinarian.
Oh, okay.
So so I went from from cats and dogs to insects, very quickly. And then again, it was all due to honeybees. And honeybees it's a very complex insect. Very, very complex. More complex than any other type of insect. I know we're talking. Are you being
real, or are you being biased?
I am being real.
Okay.
Partially because of the social aspect. The social aspect, and if you were to get, let's say for instance, if you were to get the most complex insect and study its behavior, you would almost definitely choose an insect that's very social, that lives in what we call a colony. And in a colony of insects, I mean, even their brains are even more complex. You talk about pollinators in general. And again, it's not just honeybees. I'm talking about like all types of bees. And they're the most diverse insect, aside from beetles. They're one of the most diverse insects in the world because they have co-evolved with the flowers.
Yeah, so you just said something there that like kind of convinced me in the midway, and it was I think you said the word pollen in there.
Yep.
So like if you find a praying mantis, you find one praying mantis, right? And he eats things, or you might find one female praying mantis eating another male praying mantis. But at most, you're going to find two praying mantises at a time. With bees, at least you're going to find dozens or hundreds or whatever, right?
That's right.
So that social aspect alone by itself, I guess that does make them a lot more complex. I guess I could see ants or other kind of colony things. But also the word pollen is what, so you have them being complex by themselves, and then you have being complex in the environment and the ecology and the food web and how things affect everything. So because not only do they interact with each other, but they interact with the environment by, I don't know, do they make flowers flower, or do they get stuff from flowers? They get stuff from flowers.
They get stuff from flowers,
Okay.
but in that process, they help fertilize those flowers through pollination. So again, pollination is just essentially passing the spores of, basically pollen is the spore. In the plant world. The spore is pollen, and that pollen is then transferred to another flower, which then fertilization occurs, and then from that time, now the fertilization goes from seed. So it grows from the seed, basically. So pollen gets into the stamen of the flower, and then
I don't remember my 7th grade science that well.
Exactly. Yeah, I always have to go back and be like, wait, is this the right word? Yeah. But anyways, the pollen is then transferred, fertilization occurs, and then you get a seed of something, right? And then from that seed, right, then you get the fruit. So there's a deeper layer that the bees are involved in with. When we talk about seed dispersal, we're talking about we're looking at other vertebrates like birds, wild deer, or any type of other animal that helps with seed dispersal. But how do we even get to the seed?
Let me interrupt there. So how do seeds get spread, right? So, let's say you eat some corn, and then you can later on down the line, you see the corn, right? And so birds, deer, pigs, whatever, they will eat fruits, maybe sometimes the same fruits we eat, but in plant terms, a fruit is any kind of the thing that comes after the flower. So whether humans eat it or not, that is in scientific terms those are fruits as well. And so in those fruits contain seeds, and then those seeds can go around and then be spread, and we have new plants, going all over the place.
That's right.
If that was happening, we don't have birds here. That's a slight exaggeration, but only a slight exaggeration.
Yeah.
And so we have that one part of the food web where plants grow, they flower, they make fruits, and then the fruits contain seeds, and things eat those fruits containing the seeds, and the seeds get pooped out around the island. And in the middle of that, there's pollination.
That's right.
Okay.
Right in the smack in the middle of that, there's the pollination, because in order for you to get seed, you must be pollinated. Mm-hmm. That's the big one. Mm-hmm. In order for you to get seed, because the seed is essentially the embryo of the flower. Mm-hmm. So yeah, pollen is the male gamete, and then within the
sperm and egg the correct thing to say?
You can say I guess you can say sperm and egg. Well, sperm and egg, it would be more so for like the the animal kingdom.
All right, so we have
in the plant kingdom, it's pollen.
Okay.
And the bud.
Okay.
The buds are you could say the females.
Oh, okay.
But once that pollen gets into
so we need DNA from two sources, though.
That's right.
Okay, so we have two. All right, so we have DNA from two sources.
Yep. And those bees are transferring that DNA from the males into the females.
And are they? I thought they're collecting pollen to presumably do something like this.
That's right. Actually, in actuality, they are collecting pollen for themselves. Mm-hmm. So bees are herbivores, which means they only get their food from plant material. Mm-hmm. They're herbivorous. And so where do they get their protein? They get their protein from pollen. Mm. Pollen is packed with a good amount of protein. Mm. So when we talk about protein, we're also talking about like some fatty acids, but essentially protein in general. And protein is kind of like partially the building blocks in life. Mm-hmm. And so the bees obtain the protein from pollen.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so they're collecting the pollen, but you also said that they're mixing pollen. So is that by accident? They're collecting pollen, but they lose a little bit of it as they're moving around.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they'll have on the honeybee, the third pair of legs that they have. So the hind legs have what we call a pollen basket. Also known as a cubicula. But this pollen basket will hold a good amount of pollen, like in a ball. And sometimes those pollen grains fall off of that pollen basket. Mm-hmm. But also honeybees, if you notice, they're very hairy as well. If you were to look into the bodily structure of a honeybee, you will see there's lots of hair. And in other bees, there's lots of hair on the abdomen side, on the other side. But honeybees in general, overall, their overall body is covered with hair. Mm-hmm. So I know going back on the question of the function of the hair for some insects, because as I mentioned, it's to transfer pollen, and so pollen is because hair, right? Hair attracts something that's positive. So again, going back to a little bit of some chemistry, there's the positive and negative, right? Mm-hmm. The hair would attract the pollen easily because of the there's the electron positive attraction.
So it's basically things are like really, really low key kind of magnets. Is that fair? Yeah. So it's the same thing, right? Just
that's
have it's called like polarity.
Polarity, yes. That's what it is. Yeah.
And so a magnet has a positive side, positive pole, negative side, negative pole, and everything more or less has that. Some things are a bit more, and when you get down to the cellular level or the microscopic level, atomic level. It's such a cool word. I like. Yeah. I don't get to say that very often. You get down to the atomic level, things are basically behave, let's say, like miniature, tiny magnets.
That's right.
And so you're saying part of the body is one charge, and then the stuff sticks to it like a magnet.
That's right. Yeah. And so that pollen gets carried through the hairs of the bee. Just for the bee that's foraging, not just for pollen, but also for nectar as well.
Those are different things?
So there's two different things.
I have no idea what we're now. Okay,
Yeah.
this is all new to me.
So now,
Let's do
we're
this.
diving into a different aspect of how bees forage. So bees forage for two things, right? We just discussed the pollen aspect. Now there's another aspect that bees forage for. It's called nectar. And nectar is then, once the bee picks up this nectar, so the nectar is essentially just sugar from the plant particle, from the plant itself.
Is this also in a flower?
In the flower itself.
Are they doing it at the same time, pollen and nectar?
No.
Okay.
They do it separately.
Okay.
Yeah. But some flowers give both pollen and nectar to bees. Some flowers only give nectar to bees, and some other flowers only give pollen to bees. So there's a lot of overlap. But bees have learned to kind of know what to forage for at certain times of the year. So nectar is what gives us honey.
Okay.
So when the bees go to a flower, they go into the part of the flower where they suck out the nectar, and then that nectar is completely ingested by the bee.
Okay.
But it's ingested.
So it's just swallowed.
It's just swallowed,
Okay.
but into a very specific stomach.
Huh.
It's called a honey stomach or a honey gut.
Huh.
We call it a honey gut. I don't know why we call it that, but it's called a honey gut for a specific reason. So when that nectar goes into the honey gut, that nectar is then being it is being.
I'm
what's
gonna
the
jump
word?
ahead here. Is honey bee vomit?
Yes, honey is bee vomit. Yes, but it's really cool how it works because
really cool.
it goes into the gut, and there's an enzyme in that gut that takes the water out of the nectar. It's called invertase. It's an enzyme called invertase. And so then the bee, after its flight, so during its flight back home, then the bee goes into the colony and regurgitates the nectar back up. And when we mean by regurgitate, I'm talking about vomit. And passes it on to the sister. And then does what we call the waggle dance. Because the sister's like, hey, where did you get this really cool food source from? And then the bee does its dance. It's basically a figure eight. Obviously, you won't be able to see that here because none of the bees are foraging. But what happens is that the bee will do a figure eight and will also vibrate itself. So depending on the angle of the figure eight, depends on the angle of the sun to the nectar source of the colony itself.
Say that again.
Okay. So the angle.
Go ahead and say it exactly the same.
Okay. So the angle of the figure eight, depending on how fast the bee turns to make that figure eight, depends on the angle of the nectar source from the sun to the colony. You get what I mean? So there's a Pythagorean theorem that comes into play.
Yeah. So they're just making some angles.
So there's an angle, that's determined. There's actually a formula for it. But then also how fast the bee wiggles its abdomen depends on how close the nectar source is from the colony.
So this is bee communication.
That is pure bee communication.
So this is bee talking to each other saying, it's over there and it's this close or this far.
That's exactly right.
That is insane. I'm just like, there's a scientist one day who's all like, look, studying bee dancing.
And his name is Carl von Frisch. He was a German scientist that what is it, German? I'm sorry, a Russian, I think. Carl von Frisch, maybe German. I think I always forget the.
Von might be Dutch.
Von Frisch, yeah.
Von might be Dutch.
Okay,
I'm not sure, but I think
you might be right. But this scientist, he won the Nobel Prize for figuring out the waggle dance. The formula, the actual formula for it. And this is all he had. He had an observation hive, and there was an entry and exit, and he would study individual bees that would do the waggle dance, and then he would take him out and mark him, and then try and track those bees, so that when they come back, he would say, well, okay, how close was that nectar source? And they would go out and look if that was the specific marker where the bee was foraging from. And he found out that he found that formula and won the Nobel Prize for it. Crazy.
This reminds me of a meme I saw. I don't know if this is true. Maybe you actually know. I saw this meme. There was there was an experiment where they wanted to see if ants could count, and so they made like prosthetic legs to extend the legs of to make the legs longer of individual ants, and then put them on, and then see if they would trace their way back home, and they would take the same number of steps but travel a longer distance. And so thereby somehow that proved that bees would take longer steps. And I remember the meme was concluding like, guys, there's somebody out there whose job it is to make ant prosthetics and to attach them and so on. And so like science can just be so fun. That's just crazy. You know, you just get to like, I mean, there's all kinds of sciences, there's different fields and specialties and so on, but
so many niches. And that's kind of where I found my niche in science was honeybees. And so, I guess I could be a bit biased when it comes to honeybees.
You're making a very good case, though.
But
like they have a dance. They have a dance.
Yeah,
and they have a communication dance.
A guy won a Nobel Prize because of honeybees. You know, so. And right now, the industry, the agriculture, the overall agriculture industry, honeybees are part of a $15 billion industry. Purely just on pollination.
Sorry, is that 15 billion within the U.S. or the world?
Within the U.S.
15 billion. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, within the world, I think it's about 254 billion.
Does honey taste the same everywhere, or is everybody's honey's taste different?
Everyone's honey tastes different, and Guam's own right now is at top 10 right now, thanks to Paul Pack Beer. So top 10 good food awards. So have you ever heard of the Good Food Awards? It's a global, I guess like a nonprofit organization. They collect food from around the world, and honey is a one category of food that
so the taste of our honey is top 10 in the US,
in the world.
What?
In the world.
Oh my God, that's one of my favorite things to do in this podcast, is kind of point out. I always say this in every episode, or nearly every episode. You know, we always sell ourselves short. We always think we're far behind the rest of the world and we're never going to catch up or anything like that. But there's a lot of little things and some not so little things where we're, you know, either tied with the rest of the world or maybe in some cases leading. And here we are, top 10 for like best tasting honey in the world. That's crazy.
Right. Yeah, and again, I gotta acknowledge Paul Pack Beer from PCR who put Guam on the map for that. So Good Food Awards, yeah,
amazing. Okay, cool really cool. This episode's not just gonna be only on honeybees though. So we got to talk about wasps. We got to talk about hornet. We can circle back to bees, or if you had any thoughts to finish off, it's totally fine. But like, did you have anything else you want to talk about bees?
Well, I guess
just to finish a thought,
we can kind of like go into the hornet segment by kind of doing one last thing for talking about one last thing about honeybees. So I got started in 2013 doing this survey. We found that there were mites in our honeybees.
What's a mite?
So a mite is it's not an insect, but it is an organism that's very closely related to
some kind of bug.
Closely related to spiders. Okay. So we're talking about like mites, spiders, scorpions. It kind of has its own category of insects. Chelicerata, I think, is the order. So it's a different branch. But because these mites are a very tiny microscopic organism that sucks on the blood of honeybees, specifically the varroa mite. That's what it's called.
Bees have blood. Okay.
So hemolymph. Yeah, we call it hemolymph, but yeah, bees do have blood.
Okay.
But we call it hemolymph for that particular reason in the insect world. But how I wanted to kind of segue into the hornet aspect is that during my research, during my a honeybee health survey in 2016, someone reported what they thought was either honeybees or some type of wasp, and it turns out to be the greater banded hornet. So I can kind of go into the hornet. So hornets are still in the same order as honeybees in the Hymenoptera, same order of ants.
That sounds like an Egyptian place or something, I swear.
Yeah.
You ever seen that movie, The Mummy?
Actually, that's a Hymenoptera is I think it's like a Greek. It's like a Greek word.
That makes sense.
Yeah, hymen. Yeah. So I think it's like a joining. It's like a coupling word. Hymen, and then ptera, Hymenoptera. So Ptera, that last word, that's wings. So it's a wing coupling. So when hornets and bees and wasps, when they fly, their two wings, their pair of wings actually couple together. So the forewing and the hind wing are coupled together through this structure called hamuli. But don't worry, we don't have to go deep into that. But that's why they've been given the name Hymenoptera, because it's a wing coupling insect. And so hornets that fall in the same category, of course, they sting as well. But hornets are carnivorous. Specifically, we want to talk about the greater banded hornet, which is...
So bees, honeybees, you said they're herbivores, so they only eat plants or plant materials.
That's right.
And we're talking about hornets now, and they eat meat.
They eat meat, yes, that is right. They're carnivores.
Okay.
And they eat meat that are basically other insects.
Okay.
As we can just say. Like most wasps, or most wasp and hornets, they are carnivorous insects. So they will prey.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I roll my eyes a lot of the time, very ignorantly. I'm like, bees, wasps, hornets, whatever. They're all just these wing things that sting you, but that's already a gigantic difference.
Huge difference.
Huge difference. Like herbivores, we got like vegetarians versus people like me. I love my barbecue.
Oh yeah, very true. But also, you can already tell the function of what they do in the ecosystem.
All right, you're gonna have to help me out.
Function.
Okay.
So herbivores, they get pollen, right? So that's the only way that they get their protein. So which means that they are efficient pollinators. Carnivores, well, you're not going to see them on a plant material. You're going to see them on flesh. You're going to see them on maybe some other dead, rotting material. Given, some plants do they do have this attractant for other
the Venus
insects.
flytraps.
The Venus flytraps, it's the flesh, right? But these hornets are not interested in that plant material. They're going to go after flesh. They're going to go after other insects. And in this case, the greater banded hornet is coming after our pollinators, the honeybees, and the other wasps. Actually, in fact, these hornets, their prey are actually wasps and not necessarily honeybees. That is a second preference. But because we're on a small island, very isolated, we have a good population of wasps, of the type of paper wasps. But then once the food source is running low, they're going to turn to honeybees as a second preference. And this is what makes them problematic. Not just in Guam, but worldwide. These wasps tend to prey on honeybees worldwide. And so that's kind of, again, we're rolling into hornets. So hornets are about 2 to 3 times the size of a honeybee. Some of them can get up to 4 to 5 times the size.
So like that segment of my finger there?
Yeah, so about that segment, maybe even a little bit longer than your finger.
That segment or the whole finger?
Little bit longer than that segment of your finger. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that will, and that's compared to a honeybee, you can obviously, tell yourself, well,
tell instantly.
Yeah. that who's the. I mean, one chop. Sorry, just one bite of the hornet will basically chop off the head of a honeybee.
Do wasps, hornets, and bees, do they ever bite people, or is it if you get anything from them, it's going to be a sting?
It's going to be a sting. Yeah.
All right.
So, but wasps they'll bite and then they'll sting. So they'll do both. They can do both. Kind of like ants. Ants will bite and then they sting. Yeah.
Ants have stingers too?
Oh yeah. That's what little fire ants are doing to you. They're stinging you with the toxin, not with the bite, with the sting.
I didn't know that. Okay.
It is the sting that gives off the toxin. So coming from the abdomens of the Hymenoptera, those ants, wasps, hornets, they are giving the sting. But hornets and ants, they tend to like to do both biting and stinging. So.
Okay.
Yeah,
so.
because they have powerful jaws, mandibles, that will grab onto its prey or whatever it may be doing, and then sting.
Or me.
Yeah, or you. Yeah,
I think I called you one time or something. I was we climbed the southern mountain ridge, and we were coming up the backside of Mount Schroeder or Fina Cresta, and I just got like straight into the back of my calf, and it was sharp pain, and then a burn in the area. It was tolerable.
Yeah.
It wasn't enjoyable, obviously.
Wow.
But I got to look at what it was. It was definitely bigger than a honeybee, but that's all I could say. That's all I could tell for sure. It was not a honeybee. I can't tell the difference between wasps or hornets.
Yeah.
In terms of getting stung, is it a very similar toxin or poison?
So it is very similar. Yeah, they do still kind of fall in the same toxins category. I mean, at least around, it's hard to tell, at least in this case. But with wasps and honeybees, they definitely have kind of the same, I guess you could say toxicological, the chemistry of that toxin is very similar. But it's initially just the reaction. Your body now starts to, once the toxin is been introduced in the body, then we immediately we swell up.
Yeah.
We become inflamed, and that's just us basically
That's
responding.
such a polite word, introduced. We're injected.
Yeah,
we're
injected,
stabbed.
Yeah.
The animal stabs us, with a part of its body to put that poison
Injects
in.
the toxin,
Yeah.
and then our body overreacts to that toxin. It's not necessarily it's a foreign body going inside of our bodies.
Yeah.
And so the body's initial reaction is now to send all of its I guess you could call the buildup of corticosteroids to fight off that foreign body, and that's why we tend to swell up.
What are corticosteroids?
So corticosteroids are kind of like in the body when we get a bruise or when we get some foreign body in us, we react in some way. Or if we get an injury, corticosteroids will get sent to the site where we start to inflame. So the inflammatory response is due to
swelling.
Due to the corticosteroids going to the site of whether it was a sting or whether it was a bruise, or that if we broke a bone, a bone or something. Our initial response is to swell up at the site. So that's just the overreaction of our bodies, and so that's why when we get stung, we swell. Yeah, that's initially what it is.
All right, so we get stung. I grew up like so many of us do, and like, okay, you got stung. You know what you need to do, right? You got to pee on it. Is that true?
Well, the pee only it only makes the the sting less painful, but I mean it's the same thing you would
That
use
you
for
said it. All right,
baking
so that you
soda.
heard it right there. You gotta pee on it.
But if you have vinegar or baking soda with water, or I mean, you can even just use water at sometimes, but water is very neutral. Well, you remember that there's the acidity, right? So if you use like something like baking soda, which is a very basic solution, it'll neutralize the acidity at the site of injection. So, yeah.
I remember when I was a kid. Like now, I never wear shoes. I just, unless I absolutely have to. I basically wear Zoris. But when I was young enough, when I was really young, I didn't even wear Zoris. I ran barefoot in the backyard until one day I stepped on something and it stung me right in the middle of the bottom of my foot. And then from then on, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna at least wear Zoris. But my older brother is like, all right, go in the shower and you got to pee on it. And then I did. And it actually did feel better, and I don't know if that's what's that word? It starts with a H.
Histamine?
No, P. Placebo. I don't know if it's
placebo.
not H.
I see.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's
Yeah.
placebo or if that was actual chemistry working.
Yeah.
Is it actually chemistry?
It's definitely, yeah. I mean, I'd say, yeah, you're that the chemistry is working because you're balancing out the acid.
Okay.
That has been, well, at least at the site.
Yeah, it's not. You're not trying to pee into your own.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it doesn't work
into
that
your own
way.
little
Yeah.
stab wound.
Yeah, but then
Okay.
you do get some acid, and sometimes at times I don't get stung, but I still feel the acidity of some of that venom that comes out of the stinger of the honeybee. So I don't necessarily get stabbed, but it'll sometimes, again, it'll itch a little bit because it's the acid. It's what's making us react.
Would you happen to know the pH, or could you guess?
Oh man, I forgot. I read it in an article once, and I think it's definitely about four below.
Okay.
Of the acidity. So, so yeah, the pH is it's about four below.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. So, so how often do people call you if they ever get stung?
Yeah. So,
I don't imagine you're not a doctor.
So I'm not the doc. Yeah. So whenever, I mean, I've had people call me when they did get stung, and some of them have had really bad reactions. I have a good friend of mine. He actually keeps honey. He kept honeybees for about a year, and he's gotten stung a few times
From the honeybees?
From honeybees,
Okay.
yeah. And I think his like third or fourth time that he got stung right in the forehead, and or near like the nose or something. But it was like around the facial area, and I think that night he had like hives. He is scratching everywhere. You could see the bumps on his arms. He even like video timed me and it's like kind of showing me like all of like the hives, and I was like, "Did you get stung there?" He's like, "No, only one spot." But then he started to his body was overreacting, and sometimes people develop these responses, these inflammatory responses after 4 or 5 stings. It's not just it's not just one phenomena, or like they usually say like, "Oh, you get stung once, you're okay," but if you get stung like the second time, then you're like, you could really have a bad anaphylactic shock.
Yeah,
but
and crown of
it's really
thorns.
it's really all random, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
If it happens your first time, it may not happen your second time, but it may happen like your third or fourth time. And it really all depends on, one, how much of an injection of the toxin did you get into your body, and two, did you get stung multiple times at the same site? So it really falls on that. And then of course, when you get stung, sometimes the stinger is left in for a while, and it all depends on that. When that stinger is left in your body for a long period of time, it's actually injecting the toxin. So even when bees sting you and then they fly off, the stinger is still kept into it's still on you.
So they leave the stinger in and fly away.
The stinger in and they fly away, but they die because it leaves their stinger. But that stinger is then injecting that venom because it has its own reflex response. where it
So
pumps
should you
venom.
leave it or pull it out? But if you pull it out, you might squeeze more.
Yes, exactly. That's why they say you use a credit card to
Oh.
scrape it off, right?
Okay.
I'm not sure if you ever heard of that, but
I've
use
heard
a
of
card to
flicking. I
scrape.
haven't heard, but
Yeah.
I've heard of use like for the marine side of things, like the underwater side of things, like crown of thorns. Very similar thing. We don't usually think the toxin in there is deadly, but if you keep getting stung and you keep getting you can actually develop an allergy.
That's right. Yes.
And so it sounds like a
it's
similar.
the same concept.
Okay.
Yeah. Same
And then-
concept with honeybees.
And then with jellyfish, you can use tweezers to pull it off, or you could use tentacles, the stinging cells. They're called nematocysts. Or you can
right.
use a credit card to scrape that
scrape it
off.
off, yeah.
And just don't use your bare hands so that you don't sting your hand.
That's exactly right. Yep. So same concept with honeybees. Yep.
Okay, interesting. Okay, what else?
So I guess since we're on that stinging aspect, so bees, of course, they'll lose their stinger, fly away, right? But then with wasps and hornets, paper wasps and hornets, they will sting you multiple times. So they have the opportunity to inject you in their venom multiple times without even losing their stinger. So the thing is with honeybees, they have a stinger that kind of acts as a like an arrow, where you get hit with an arrow and it's hard for you to like.
It was like a barb shape.
Barb. That's what it is. Well, with wasps and hornets, they don't have this barb. It's just like a spear. So they can sting you multiple times without losing their own stinger, and that's how you can tell.
That happened to one of my brothers. The same little thing, just like.
Yep.
And he thought he said he wasn't
Like
sure if he
multiple
got
bees, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or multiple, stinging insects that are like getting at him when it really could only be just one. Yeah.
Yeah, and some people are even just allergic. Period.
That's right.
Yeah, I think one of my brothers. I have like 4 or 5 brothers, something like that. I don't keep an inventory of my brothers.
Yeah.
Just so many of them.
Yeah.
One of my brothers was allergic growing up. I don't know if he's still allergic, but so it's something to to really keep an eye out. And is that something people can do at home? Well, they have, what are those, nests and stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
So that's where we urge the public to give us a call. If you have a nest at home, we'll
What's
be
that
happy
number?
to 475 pests. Yeah.
Okay.
But you can either call us or you call your local pest control agency, because those pest control agencies, they have the protective gear and all that stuff. Of course, it does come with the price. But for those who can't really afford, we want to provide the service for the community.
You can at least have a look, right?
Right, have a look and say, here, this is what I recommend, or this, and we don't just we give the numbers to all the we give the numbers to the community for all pest control agencies, not just one particular one.
Yeah.
So,
but with regards to your number, 475 pests, and to the cynics out there and naysayers, I've called it actually multiple times and people answer.
That's right. Yes. You do answer,
so I think you guys go out, into the field sometimes, so you don't answer like every single time someone will call, but I imagine if someone tries to call a couple times throughout a day, someone will pick up the phone.
Oh, for sure, sure. Yeah, and then we'll respond. We'll have a trying to get a quicker response time for that.
Yeah,
for the most part.
And
so.
on the note of nests and stuff, I remember we went searching for brown tree snakes on Coco's Island, and you're just up there with the flat. You're looking up we're all looking up in the trees with a flashlight, and you're like, "Hey, everybody, come look at this. This is a nest only for this, and only this kind of thing makes that kind of nest, and this is how you can tell, and so on." So you can do that at people's houses and everything.
That's a hornet nest. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Actually, in fact, it was very surprising to see that, because that's down in Coco's Island, and we never recorded greater band hornet. Well, I haven't been there, obviously, but
I don't imagine there's many other people that
but they're going down there. That's true. That's very true. And so, just seeing that firsthand was like, wow, I couldn't believe. So greater band hornet has basically flew its way down to Coco's Island from Guam. I mean, not that far, but it's quite a distance still for a hornet.
Yeah, I swam that distance one time, and like that was long, and these things are really small. Like, how much energy do they have to like fly? What was it, a mile and a half or something like that?
Yeah, that's quite significant. So it's pretty scary because we got other islands that are pretty close by. So it's only a matter,
could they fly the distance to
Rota?
Rota?
To Rota, yeah. Could they fly to Tinian or Agrihan or Saipan? And that's one of the big things is that we want to be able to monitor that. And this is why University of Guam and Department of Ag are going up. We're going up to these islands to make sure that we're controlling that we're mitigate the spread of these insects, specifically hornets too, because it's a public hazard. At that point, it's a public health concern.
That's what I think most people have an interest in is like. It's not like, okay, great, another invasive species, but, it's like, okay, this is an invasive species that can, hurt my kids. Like, I don't have kids yet, but, like I grew up, when we were kids, one of my brothers was allergic and, that could have been a trip to the hospital or worse. And, and so when, you guys have these ads on Instagram or posters around about unwanted invasive species and blah, blah, and then it's it's very easy. I'm sorry, no offense to anybody. It's very easy to roll your eyes at these kinds of things because it's like, what can we do when they're already here? And we've been talking, and there's actually a bunch of stuff we can do. Maybe not full-on eradication, or maybe down the line, but most importantly, prevent things from getting here. Right. These things that are a threat to ourselves, to our kids, even to our pets, who some of us very much feel like our kids.
Actually I have a pet now.
And you have a pet?
I have a pet that that got stung in the eye and is blind, completely blind on the left eye. Left eye.
Dog or cat?
Dog.
Oh, that's even worse.
It sniffed around the wrong place, around a bush, and it just by pure bad luck, chance, just got right directly in the eye.
Well, do you know what it was?
It was a paper wasp.
It was a paper wasp.
Palestes stigma. That's the
one sting.
The Asian paper wasp.
One bite or one bite and sting.
Yeah.
And it's blind.
Trip to the hospital, and by that time, the acid just, it was completely covered. That the eyes completely like cataract.
And there's no reason that couldn't happen to a person.
A person too,
So
easily happen to a person. Yeah.
Man, I've been stung many times in my life. Feet, hands, arms, legs.
Yeah. But the chances of your eye.
But
jeez.
I think I got a little fire ant bite in my nose one time, and it's such a sensitive area. Your face is such a sensitive area.
Yep.
I was cutting a branch off a tree because I wanted to make something, and I thought it didn't make any sense in my brain in those microseconds. You know how things go so fast when your adrenaline starts going. I thought I actually cut off part of my nose with my machete somehow, and I know that made no sense. And then I just realized there's some ants probably that fell off of the tree, and onto my face. And my friend was with me. Hi, Ash. She got a few bites in the face, and her face was swollen too. And like, if it was just an inch in this direction, and it bit my eye, I don't know if I would cause blindness. One bite from an ant, but that'd be even worse than getting bit in the nose.
Exactly.
And so, just on the note, like, none of these are native, right?
None of them are native.
We have no native wasps, no native hornets. So they all got here some way or another.
That's right. Yeah.
By accident from people not getting their stuff inspected.
That's
by
right.
people.
People bringing in lots of cargo. We don't know how it got in, but containers.
And we're back. Sorry about that. The camera overheated, so we had to take a little break. We left off with all these stinging insects getting here by accident because people aren't having their stuff inspected properly. And you had a thought.
Yeah, and so that thought is, well, going even further back, before invasive species ever became a problem. Actually, in fact, all stinging insects on Guam are not native to Guam. So
we failed pretty hard.
So but this is including honeybees. Honeybees have have been introduced into Guam purposely for pollination. It just, of course, so happens to that they are also part of the singing insect category. But with, again, that they had more of a purpose in the ecosystem or with the farmers than they did with the other invasives. And so, honeybees were brought into Guam along with other honey producing plants or nectar producing plants or the plants that produced fruit. And this was just in 1907. It was along the same time the chain of love was introduced as an ornamental. And now
I think we should draw some distinctions here. So we have native species which have either like always been here or were here before humans or brought here not by humans, and then you have introduced plants, and introduced plants came here by people, and within you can have introduced plants, animals, or whatever that become a problem, and we call those invasive species, or you can have introduced plants or animals that really don't have an effect or have a positive effect. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Are honeybees invasive? Are they a problem? Are they introduced and they're not a problem? Or are they a little bit of both, more one than the other?
That's right. Yeah. So this is a very, very, very good question that you ask here. In other parts of the world, they are very invasive. Depending on what species, subspecies of honeybees you're dealing with, they are very invasive. Actually, honeybees, Apis mellifera, so a certain type of subspecies of honeybees is the #1 top invasive species in the world. It's called Apis mellifera scutellata. Apis mellifera scutellata is what we call the Africanized honeybee. So it's a hybrid of the Apis mellifera, and it formed its own subspecies over time by being introduced. And so actually, in fact, it came from Africa. So it's an Africanized version of the Western honeybee.
Okay.
That's what it is. And so it is the very, very most invasive. But
Around the world.
Okay. Yeah. On Guam, we have what we call Apis mellifera linguistica. So it's the Italian honeybee. It is it's not invasive because it doesn't have that aggressive behavior that it doesn't have aggressive behavior towards
other pollinators
or humans in general. But because they've been out in the wild for a very long time, they still kind of exhibit this feral behavior. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're invasive. It all depends on how you look at the ecosystem. If you are a conservationist, honeybees are straight up invasive. Doesn't matter what species they are. When we define an invasive species, we talk about an organism that competes with man and other native organisms in the ecosystem. Well, when honeybees were first introduced, they were going out and pollinating other plants, and in fact, they were pollinating several other native plants. Before honeybees were introduced into Guam, we had our own native sweat bee, our own native leafcutter bee, but we don't see them anymore. And that's probably likely due to honeybees, the introduction of honeybees. Honeybees had outcompeted with the sweat bee and with the leafcutter bee. Why is that? Well, when species, again, this is all due to competition. Competition to acquire pollen and nectar from those flowers. So you're talking about a colonial insect, honeybees, competing against a sweat bee or a leafcutter bee, which is a solitary insect, an insect that only lives in one, in basically as one individual, and one individual raising young. So you can think of this as like a mud dauber that's on your front porch, right?
Yeah.
That's a solitary wasp. As opposed to paper wasps. Paper wasps are colonial wasps, which live, it's a colony of insects, which is like about a dozen or more individuals. And so going back to the bee world, sweat bees, we had a native sweat bee and we had a native leafcutter bee that probably no longer exists. I've yet to see one in the environment.
Okay.
Sweat bees probably still exist, but in very small pockets of the island. I have yet to see him. I've seen one in the CNMI, so that's further north. So within the Marianas Islands, we do have a native sweat bee. But on Guam, they were probably outcompeted by honeybees. And so that study was done back in the early 1930s. I believe 1994 was the last time someone actually had seen one. But again, this is just according to the articles here.
Yeah.
But if you're to go on the conservationist view, they're considered invasive.
Okay.
If you look at the farmer view, or the I guess as a honey producer, agricultural view, agricultural perspective, no, they are considered a pollinator and they're not considered invasive. So it really all depends on what side you're on at this point.
No, that makes perfect sense. So yeah, even me, this is stuff I'm learning and I'm having to digest it. I'm not sure how I feel about all of it yet, but at the same time, they're doing something. They're doing they're doing something, and that much is clear.
Yeah.
It's not like, let's say, for example, brown tree snakes, which contribute nothing and only and only have negative effects. Coconut rhinoceros beetle eating our coconut tree, destroy our coconut trees, only having negative effects. So I can see the struggle with trying to figure out what side we should be on with honeybees, and aside from that, like you said, it's been over 100 years.
That's right.
It's been over 100 years. We didn't know basically anything, like ecologically speaking, back then.
Yeah, we did.
And so I'm trying to be forgiving. Not that I have to be forgiving.
Right.
But I'm trying to just look back with some generosity and look to now. So even though I'm a little sad, we don't have these native pollinators, even though I've never seen them or honestly even heard of them before. Suddenly I'm a little sad. Yeah. But at the same time, I can see value with having honeybees and still pollinating. Like, avocado is not a native species.
That's right.
But it does something for us, and it's even, I would argue, become a bit of a part of our culture, our food culture.
That's right.
And so things are always changing, environments are always changing, cultures are always changing.
One thing that I have learned in this industry of invasive insects worldwide, or even just in the insect world, everything is not all good and not all bad. There's always a bit of both. Like rhino beetle.
Where's it good?
Where's it good?
Is there a 1% of good?
There is a 1% of good.
Okay.
The larva stage, they're great composts. They're great for breaking down material for compost. But once you get to the adult stage, that's where all the damage is being done by those adults. But if you could harvest the grubs, and you can get the greatest composting you can ever get with those larvae, with all the larvae. But that's just a tiny percent of it. For farming, it'd be great. But then once you get to the adult stage,
I think that's also a really clear example of where the bad really, really, really outweighs the good.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's exactly right. So that's where there's that, it outweighs the very good. You hit it right on the dot there. So with honeybees, there's now we've have this insect that's been here for over 100 years. There's no turning back. There's no way we're going to eradicate the species, and there's probably even no way that we can even get that native bee back. just because there's so much competition out there that they're easily outcompeted by honeybees. And so now with an industry on Guam developing this apiculture industry from 5 beekeepers to 100 beekeepers, now we can kind of make something that we could think considered is we feel that it's kind of bad, that they were first introduced, wiped out some of our native species, but now we have to make the most of what we have here. Make the most of the resources that we have here. They're still in the natural environment. They're still out there, out in the jungle. So they're naturally breeding. So we take this natural resource and put it to our to the fullest potential.
Yeah, and just to add another dimension to this, we talk about food sovereignty, or
That's right.
even forget that. If we just want to grow more of our own food, we need a bit of nature's help, and if it's a little bit of introduced nature, that's at least we have
That's
that.
where the good outweighs the bad.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
That's right. And that's exactly right. There's always a bit of both. That's just kind of what I learned. I was actually sad to know that Apis mellifera is partially the most invasive insect in the world. And I couldn't believe that. I was like, before I got my degree, I was just like, there's no way, that's such a, it's such a horrible thing to feel, because, it's something that you've been studying. And then you see all these, these TikTok of the Texas Bee Works, this girl doing the whole saving the bees and everything, and then you see some comments that people make, like, you're saving the wrong species, and it makes me sad to know that. But it's just kind of something that now we kind of have to accept. It's here, it's kind of here to stay. Now we're gonna make the most of our resource, and it's that's just kind of how,
and that's just
right?
life. It's messy. Life is messy, and it's the world we live in, and we shape it, and we're participating in the shaping of things. And it's through our actions and our words that things move around or don't move around. And so all we can do is try to guide things with the best intentions and the best actions. And with that, we're going to end this episode. Please shout out your social media handles and the Guam Beekeepers Association, or anything like that. And 475 Pests for reporting hornets and wasps and bees. And then Guam Beekeepers Association can also help with that too.
Yeah, we can help with with the hornet eradication.
It's your contact info.
Contact info. So it could be, you could call the 475 Pests, or you can either call a local beekeeper. You could call me if also 671-487-1640. Again, I'm happy to give my number out. Are you
sure you want to leave that in?
Totally, yeah.
Okay.
And I've left it out since 2013. I've left it out there, available for the public. One thing, the last thing I want to say is the beekeeping association that has been formed has really helped the community outreach in terms of retrieving bee colonies. And so it made my life, my job easier at the university and here at Department of Ag to kind of spread the wealth of honeybees that are currently in residential areas that need to be, these are bee colonies that need to be rescued. So it's almost like picking a stray dog off the street and giving them a new home. And this is exactly what we're doing for our honeybees.
Yeah, when last time we met, or one of those first times we met, we literally got those bee honeycombs and beehives out of a school.
Out of a school, yeah,
okay.
That's right.
All right, Chris, thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Yes.
This was great.
Yeah, great talk. Thank you again for having us.
That was yet another episode with Chris Rosario here, and we'll see you on the next one.